So,
Give us a half a second.
oh, okay.
I guess it's taking a second to go live.
Okay, we are now live streaming on YouTube. So we'd like to welcome everybody, either good morning, good afternoon, good night, or good evening, rather, depending on where in the world you are joining us from. We are happy to have you with us. So Vanderbilt is everywhere. And we are able to reach you in all parts of the world. And really, this is a great opportunity to get to know you better and for you to get to know us better as well. So we know that many of you that are joining us tonight are really curious about, all right, what's life like at Vanderbilt? What's the graduate experience life, here in engineering? And then specifically, we're going to be talking about biomedical engineering. So I will be hosting tonight's session. We have three current PhD students with us. And so a little bit about myself before we get started. So my name is Gabriel Luis. So I am the Director of Graduate Recruitment for the School of Engineering. So I'm recruiting students for our undergraduate summer research, master's and PhD programs across the board in engineering. So you may have joined us back in late June. We had a session where I was talking about graduate programs in engineering, about the application process. And so we're actually going to be doing monthly segments. So we actually decided to call this show like the VUSC, so the Vanderbilt University School of Engineering Graduate Program Conversation Hour. So we'll be featuring a different program each month. So tonight it's going to be BME, Biomedical Engineering. So what I'll do is if each one of you could just, when I call your name, just give us a quick shout out, a little bit about yourself. If you want to maybe just give us a nice, quick fact, what year you are in the PhD program and what's your main area of study. That would be great. And then from there, we will begin today's panel discussion. So let's go ahead and start with Carly.
Hi, everybody. My name is Carly DeJulius. I am starting my 4th year in the BME PhD program. My advisor is Craig Duvall, and we are a drug delivery and therapeutics lab. So I focus on sustained release formulations for joint and ocular pathologies. I'm originally from Northeast Ohio and loving Nashville. So that's me.
All right, wonderful. Thank you, Carly. Next up, let's go with Winona.
Hi, I'm Winona Ritchie. I'm starting my 5th year here at Vanderbilt. I work in Dr. Michael Miga's lab, and I do image guidance. So basically a system to show surgeons where tumors are in the operating room using a bunch of different technologies. I think that was everything. Is that everything?
Yes, sounds good. Do you have a fun fact or something you'd want to share with the group?
Fun fact, I like to play guitar.
Nice. And it just so happens to be that being here in Nashville, Tennessee is Music City, USA. So you can find a ton of places to listen to good music. And we even have, as you see here, students that play the guitar and that have all these, just a lot of, really neat hobbies. So thank you for sharing that. Let's go with Wilson.
Hi, everyone. My name is Wilson Adams. I actually just recently graduated after, I guess, 6 years in the Vanderbilt Biophotonics Center. My PhD worked on building microscopes to understand how we can control neurons better to hopefully treat different kinds of neurological diseases. And now I'm actually postdocing a couple buildings over in the Vanderbilt Department of Pharmacology, so not too far away, doing similar stuff. Lasers, brains, microscopes, that kind of stuff. As far as fun fact about me, I guess one of the reasons I like Nashville so much is because I ride my bike a lot. And Nashville's warm enough that I could actually get away with riding my bike year round, which is pretty sweet.
Nice. All right. Thanks a lot for the intros. So before we get started, I actually just want to give a really quick shout out to Emily Muting, my colleague in engineering who helped to put all this together. So definitely big shout out to Emily for organizing this. All right, well, we are going to begin tonight's panel discussion. So the students, our listeners, they're going to really want to know what is it really like to be a student at Vanderbilt, and in particular in engineering in the BME program. So this is really a great way just to kind of give them that insight from your perspective. So we'll go ahead. We have a list of several questions, and then we'll leave a little bit of time for some Q&A at the end for anybody that might have some questions to ask the panel today. All right, so let's go ahead and start with the first question. And feel free to, I won't necessarily call out individuals, but whoever feels like they want to answer, just jump in. And if all three of you want to answer the same question, that's great. We'll leave it fluid in that sense. So let's go ahead. First question is, so what was it about, so why did you want to pursue graduate studies in the first place? So why did you decide to go to graduate school?
I can chime in on that first. It wasn't necessarily the most elegant answer, I guess, but I ended up in graduate school because I did not get a job out of undergrad. And I got offers from 3 different graduate schools. So I kind of, at the end of undergrad, I had applied for both PhD programs, a couple of master's programs, and a whole bunch of jobs. The jobs didn't pan out, and PhD programs are generally paid for by not me. So that's how I ended up in graduate school.
I can answer, but my reasoning is different now than it was then. But I applied for graduate school because during undergrad I was like doing research, and I was tutoring, and I was working at the Center for Public Service at Tulane, where I went for undergrad. So doing a lot of outreach, and also of course doing classes. And I was like thinking to myself, wow, I just really love like doing all these different things, and I want to like keep doing, like I don't want to have a job where I just do one thing all day. And so I thought to myself, oh, my professors also do, outreach and teaching and research. And so I was like, I want to be a professor. Then I can keep this sort of life that I'm living, where there's all these, wearing all these different hats, doing all these different things. So I was like, if I want to be a professor, then the next step is to go to graduate school. So that was in my junior year when I had that sort of realization. Then I did an REU, and then I applied to graduate school, and then I went to graduate school, and now who knows what I'll do after this. But at the time, that's why I did it.
Yeah, my reasoning was similar to Winona's. I am really interested in staying in academia and becoming a professor. So a PhD is sort of non-negotiable for that career path. So that was my reasoning.
Nice. And I'm going to kind of throw in another question that wasn't necessarily planned, but I think it's very relevant to what we're talking about right here. And that is, so what about somebody who maybe doesn't want to go into academia after they graduate? Let's just say they want to go maybe to a national lab, they want to go into industry. Kind of what would be your advice to them about pursuing a PhD in that situation in terms of the types of opportunities they can find after they graduate?
Yeah, so a PhD is still super valuable no matter what you are thinking about after. There's a lot of work in industry for like biomedical engineering PhDs, like maybe Wilson and Winona know more about sort of the imaging and computing side of it, but I know in sort of my focus area, there's tons of like pharmaceutical companies, and all the way from like the really big ones that we've heard of down to like startups who are interested in PhDs to run their research groups and really like drive their R&D and discovery sections. Another option that Gabriel also mentioned is like national labs, or sort of related to that is like government labs and positions. That's something you can do, or you can leverage your PhD for all other kinds of different work. So it's a really good point that Gabriel has brought us to is that there's a lot more you can do out of graduate school besides just like the academic track.
I just started I'm starting my last year of graduate school. So I've just started to dip my toes into the water of what am I doing next, and apply, like, looking at jobs and seeing what's out there. And I would argue there's almost too many options, that there's like, it's kind of hard to narrow it down I still have time, but to be like, what there's a lot out there, in terms of like companies to work for, or national labs, everything that Carly said. It's almost overwhelming. But I will add the point of, I guess there are jobs, you don't need a PhD for every job. So, have some sort of, well, I don't know, you could just do a PhD for doing the sake of it, for the sake of doing a PhD, but, I guess I have a couple of thoughts on that, but that's a whole different tangent.
Yeah, so I guess to kind of add on to what y'all said, I know that at least in the lab that I did my PhD in, more recently, actually, the last like 4 students that graduated from our lab all ended up going into postdocs and are on the faculty path. But I would say 85% of the students that have graduated from our lab are in industry in some capacity. And they're perfectly happy, perfectly well off, doing really cool jobs all over the place. Some people are, at the bench doing a bunch of really cool, like wet lab experiments. Some people are like guiding think tanks and like big labs and stuff for people that have a lot more money than we could ever imagine. And also our lab collaborates a lot with the Air Force Research Labs. There's several departments on campus that collaborate with Oak Ridge National Lab and Sandita National Lab. So there's definitely opportunities to get into a program or a lab working in those sorts of capacities where you could easily get your foot in the door somewhere that you may want to work, especially if you're interested in sort of the national lab or government lab type stuff. But that being said, the nice thing about graduate school is it kind of just prepares you for how to figure things out really well. More so than you come out of undergrad, like knowing a bit of a codified body of knowledge and like a little bit of critical thinking. Graduate school is like, I would say 75% critical thinking. So I may not know a hell of a lot about drug delivery, but I at least know who I can go talk to if I need to learn something about it for a problem I need to address for a job that I'm doing. And that's more of what the graduate school is really teaching you. And you can either go to a degree program for that, or you can just go get hard experience in industry. There's definitely more than one way to do it.
All right. No, those are great answers. And just to kind of take note that, so the panel that we have today, they're all either in the PhD program or just recently finished the PhD program. But I just wanted to make apparent also that, so BME also does have a master's program as well, the Master's of Science program. So there may be some students here that thinking about the PhD, but maybe they're also looking at doing a master's. So just so that they know that while we'll probably be talking more about the PhD in this discussion, we do also have master's programs available as well in BME. All right, next question. So what is it about? So first of all, like, how did you first hear about Vanderbilt, and in particular the biomedical engineering program? And I guess what were some of the key factors that led to you wanting to apply to our program?
I can go because I have a pretty straightforward answer, I guess. So Winona mentioned doing an REU in undergrad, which REU stands for Research Experience for Undergraduates. It's a National Science Foundation funded program to expose undergraduates to lab research. So I did one of those as well when I was the summer between my sophomore and junior years. And the professor I worked for ended up moving to Vanderbilt. So when it came time for me to apply to graduate school, I had really enjoyed working in her lab. So it only made sense for me to apply to Vanderbilt as one of my schools for graduate school. And then sort of ironically throughout that process, I ended up meeting other professors and like we hit it off. And I decided to come to Vanderbilt, but I actually work for a different PI. But so that's kind of ironic, but very, I don't know, it all kind of worked out, I guess. But that's how I ended up applying and selecting Vanderbilt. So I would really encourage, if you're interested in getting experience, looking into these NSF funded RUs and trying to pursue those. And we can talk more about those later if you guys are interested.
It's funny. I actually had a very, very similar sort of track, I guess. I did an RU my I guess in between, or one of my last summers before I came to graduate school. I ended up doing an RU, and I ended up working for that professor who I was researching for the following year after that. And he had, when I decided I wanted to pursue the whole graduate school route, he gave me a few like pointers on where to look, and he suggested Vanderbilt because the guy that he knew at Vanderbilt from when he had done his postdoc at Cornell, this guy was running the imaging facility here at Vanderbilt. So I come and interview at Vanderbilt, come to find out he's actively moving his lab to Washington University in St. Louis. So that didn't work out, but I did end up getting in with the Biophotonics Center here at Vanderbilt. I interviewed with everybody who was on faculty there, and the Biophotonics Center at Vanderbilt is actually really world renowned for the kind of research that we do in terms of like bringing optics stuff into the clinic and actually doing patient data measurements and stuff. So I was aware of it, but I didn't really settle on a lab until like well after the interview process went down. So
I don't know if you want everyone to answer. My answer is messier. I methodically, like over the course of the entire summer before senior year, combed through, I want to say like 50 schools, like lists of professors, basically keeping a detailed document of who was doing what research. I'm at the intersection of computer science and biomedical engineering. So it was sort of difficult to find people. I mean, everyone's doing really interesting research. Well, I don't know. I mean, that's not true. But it was hard for me to find people who were doing research that I wanted to do. You know, you have to be really passionate about the kind of research that you're doing if you're going to spend 5+ years doing it. And so I, had a list of, places I was willing to go with research I was willing to do. And also like in a program that was, top 50 schools or whatever. And so Vanderbilt made it onto my short list of the most interesting research at the most fun, or not like fun, but like places I would be most willing to move to. So it was a combination of those things that, it was like top 8 schools, based on, actually, funnily enough, I only put schools in my top 8 if there was more than one professor on the list that I would be willing to work for, because a lot of schools do, you might not get your top choice, basically, in the way that the cookie crumbles. Funnily enough, one of the top, there were 2 professors I really wanted to work for at Vanderbilt. And then during the recruitment weekend, I found out that one of them had retired. He had retired like the previous year or something. And they were like, oh yeah, like you can't work for him. He doesn't work here anymore, basically. But it worked out because I work for the other guy. Anyway.
All right. So it's like it all worked out. So, which is the important part.
It worked out, yeah, splendidly. And I talked to there's other research here that I'm very interested in, but in terms of committing to a PhD, I was really into Dr. Miga's lab.
Right. Nice. So kind of like based off of that, of the last question. So I guess to the listeners out there tonight, like what are some tips, or I guess what are some things that you think you did well on the application that helped you to get in? I mean, to get into the program, like what made you stand out, in other words, on the application?
I know for a fact that my research experience is what stood out on my application. I had done research pretty much since my freshman year all the way through to graduating, both during the semesters and the summer. And I was fortunate enough to be able to get paid for all of that. A lot of, depending on what school you're at, that may differ. My professors at the University of Maine were really awesome and adamant about paying me. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to do it. And with that research experience, I did not have the best grades. I was a pretty middle of the road student in undergrad. I know mostly B's, a couple C's there, some A's as well. But I was by no means an amazing didactic student. But the amount of research experience I had, coupled with me going into a project that I was really, really excited about, like I just wanted to build microscopes, and that's the project I got hired on to do, or I got recruited on to do. So it was really a bit of preparation on my part, plus being in the right place at the right time, finding the right people that needed somebody to do some stuff at the right time.
I feel like my biggest advice on that is to do things that you like doing. I think that like that's kind of how it ended up for me. I did computer science and biomedical engineering in undergrad, and I did an REU that was totally computer science based. And I think that Dr. Miga definitely was looking for someone who had computer science background, because we do basically all coding or almost all coding in our lab. And so there was that, but also like I took as my like focus in biomedical engineering, soft tissue mechanics, partially because I couldn't do computer science focus because it conflicted with actual computer science classes at Tulane, and partially because I was interested in it. I was like, I mean, I don't know what to focus in, but this class is interesting. I like this professor. And so I basically took soft tissue mechanics, and now, and I did it because I liked doing it, and I was just like kind of floating through life, I guess. Same with the REU. And I think that, in terms of Dr. Miga looking at my resume, being like, oh, she does computer science, she did coding. Oh, soft tissue mechanics. Like we do soft tissue deformation modeling in our lab. Like that is what he's a mechanics guy. So I think just sort of the combination of basically I liked, like if you do what you like, then the things that are on your resume are going to be things that make you a good fit for a lab that you like. That being said, I also did a few things that I didn't like, and then I knew that I didn't want to do them. And so when people tried to recruit me to do those things, I was like, I'm not really interested in doing that. So I guess, I don't know, just, I guess, do what you like, but also find out what you don't like as well.
Yeah, I would reiterate what Wilson said about research. I think that having some research experience, if you are able to get it, really helps you stand out. And then I guess something that I had that maybe not all the other applicants did was, I guess, like extracurriculars and like leadership experience, like in some of the clubs that I was part of. So if, like Winona said, if there's things that you really like, and you can find ways to pursue that in terms of like student organizations, like that's really great. And if you can take officer positions or leadership roles in those clubs or organizations, that is a great thing to put on your resume. It also, a huge part of graduate school applications, including at Vanderbilt, is letters of recommendation. And the two things that I just talked about, student organizations and research, are great ways to get really, really good letters. And I think that my letters also probably helped me stand out especially when compared to students who potentially were a little bit less involved. So maybe had to sort of just ask, their kind of random calculus professor to write them a letter, for example. So that's something that potentially not a lot of people who are early in this process think about a lot, but it's something that if you can lay the groundwork for it early, it can really like bear fruit later in this process, because almost all schools are going to ask for 2 letters and a lot of programs ask for 3. And it can be really hard, especially to find that third one. So yeah, student orgs and research can be really good.
All right, that was great, and it's nice because I think that one thing that really makes Vanderbilt engineering stand out is the fact that when we recruit students, we're looking for very students with multidisciplinary backgrounds in many cases. So students that are able to be adaptable, they're coming in with different types of concentrations, experiences. They're able to bring that to the table when it comes to the kind of research that we're doing, which in many respects is very much interdisciplinary. So kind of segueing into the next question on that note, what are some, so once you arrived to Vanderbilt, what have been some of the highlights of being in graduate school? And then also specifically within, the biomedical engineering department and the research that you do, the types of, just having access to all these really nice resources on campus.
I would love to answer that. So I'm part of, or I guess Dr. Miga is, and then by association, I'm part of VICE, the Vanderbilt Institute for Surgery and Engineering. And I cannot speak highly enough of VICE. So it's basically a collaboration between clinicians and engineers, but it's engineers from all disciplines. So like anyone who's doing an engineering project that benefits surgery is welcome into VICE. So I know Carly's been a part of VICE, but first of all, there's a really nice VICE space, but it also just like facilitates, I guess this isn't an organized answer because there's so many good things about VICE, but there's a physical space where you can meet clinicians and you can collaborate with people from mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, computer science, neuroscience. I don't even know all the disciplines that are included in VICE. Not a good advertisement, but also it allows through VICE, Dr. Miga runs, there's a T32 grant that funds people. And so actually both me and Carly were on the T32. And through that, you can take classes that are like grant writing. Well, it's not the name of the class, but it's the skills that you get, grant writing and shadowing clinicians. So the ability to shadow clinicians is, huge, absolutely enormous. There are so many engineers out there that are designing really amazing, really fantastic technology that just is very difficult to incorporate into real clinical practice. So having the opportunity to actually, first of all, like Carly was saying about building relationships, laying the groundwork, being able to have that much face time with a surgeon, shadowing them over the course of an entire semester is huge just for my career. And also it's huge for the project to be able to, for me to just sit there like as a fly on the wall in the operating room and to see, the things that I learned come up all the time, things you wouldn't even think about, like, oh, the things that they wear on their head aren't necessarily sterile, even when the rest of them is. And I know that because, we're thinking about putting virtual reality goggles on them, but it's like, oh, well, would we need them to be sterile? And it's like, well, no, they wouldn't need to be sterile, because when I was shadowing the headlamps that they wear, they walk in and out of the operating room with them. And like being able to think through it like that, thinking back on these experiences, it comes in handy all the time. That's a lame example, I guess, but being able to have so much interaction with clinicians is huge. And I'm doing that through VICE. And I think that's also facilitated by the actual physical proximity of Vanderbilt University and the medical center, where I can literally wheel equipment from my lab to the operating room through some underground tunnels. And it takes whatever, 10 minutes or something. You just, a short walk. It's like halfway between my apartment and my lab is the, is the operating room. And you can just wheel equipment there and use it in surgery. I mean, obviously there's, cleaning and stuff, but you can't just like wheel any old thing there, but given protocols. Anyway, it's my long, that is the most amazing thing about Vanderbilt. And I think that is rare. There are other schools that have similar proximity. But I think Vanderbilt's really, really, really got it going on in that if you want to do medical research.
If I could add to that a little bit, I'm literally the only person in my 12-person lab that does not do anything surgically involved. Everybody else is like in the operating room taking measurements. But looking at Vice from distance, one of the awesome things about it is that like just being able to sit down for lunch or at the table or something with 3 professors and 3 surgeons, or 3 cardiac surgeons, 3 neurosurgeons or something, and just like bouncing ideas off of each other. It's very rare that you get into a situation like that where your engineering school is literally in the hospital or right next to the hospital, and that's what's really special, I think, about Vanderbilt, especially our biomedical engineering department, especially if you're going to be doing surgical guidance stuff, or anything involving surgery. As for me, though, on I do more of like the basic science type engineering, more for like biomedical researchers at the bench and whatnot. One of the things I've had a blast doing here is helping my PI really build out a lot of our microscopy infrastructure. I said I just wanted to build microscopes when I got here, and that's pretty much what I did. I helped build, more than half a dozen microscopes that some ranging in value from like $50K to almost $2 million each. It's been an absolute blast. And my PI, Anita Mahadevan Jensen, she's given me a lot of flexibility to provide input and really get involved in growing this sort of microscopy infrastructure that we have at the Biophotonics Center and at Vanderbilt as a whole. And it's been a blast to see that program grow and be a part of it.
Cool. Yes. To third the sentiment, Vice is amazing. So I'll I guess talk a little. I think the question was phrased as like, what's your favorite part about graduate school? And so Winona and Wilson done a great job like talking about Vanderbilt. So I'll maybe talk a little bit more about like graduate school in general. So I think like my favorite part of being a grad student is the independence and the flexibility. I think there's a couple basic things that people who are new to this maybe don't understand about engineering graduate school. So Wilson did mention this at the beginning, but I just want to reiterate it that pretty much any good program, you are getting paid. You are not like paying tuition. So we each receive a stipend, which is really nice and pretty different from potentially a lot of other like disciplines. And then the second thing is like as a some people kind of think of graduate school as just an extension of undergrad with just like more, maybe just like more harder classes or something. But you're actually, your day is a lot more structured, especially in your later years, as kind of like a 9-to-5 job, if that's what you want it to be, where you go to lab, you get your stuff done, and then you get to go home. So I just really enjoy the independence of like working on my project and thinking through my ideas, the flexibility of being able to come to work like when it works for me and leave like when I get all of my things done for the day. I think it's these like 4 to 6 years that you would be a graduate student are very, very unique. You probably won't have another time like this in your life. So I think it's really important to just like take advantage of it. And it's a really great time, I guess, for like personal growth as well. So those are some of my general thoughts about the experience of graduate school. But Vanderbilt in particular is a great place to be a graduate student.
All right. Yeah, that's I mean, wonderful examples in terms of just, what makes Vanderbilt just, different, special, unique in so many different ways. And each perspective that you offered, it was completely different from the other, but it was so connected with the whole image of, kind of the one Vanderbilt, so to speak. So yeah, no, that was excellent. Yes, go ahead.
Actually add one more thing. So we spoke a lot about Vice, but there are other like really huge, the Vanderbilt, VUIS, Vanderbilt University Institute for Imaging Science. There's a lot of other things, like if you're not in a Vice lab, that doesn't mean that like, oh, you don't have anything going on. There are like a lot of these things. Vice is, unique and special, and I love it. But like, there are other things going on at Vanderbilt that are similarly huge and integrated, if not more huge and integrated than Vice. So don't think that if you're not doing surgery and engineering that it's lame, because there's huge imaging, huge biophotonics center, like Wilson mentioned. I mean, there are other things going on.
And there's like student government and stuff, right? You guys are both pretty involved with the BME GSA, right? Graduate Student Association.
Yeah.
Yes, good point. I was actually gonna ask a question kind of on the line of, kind of what, yes, as a graduate student, especially as a PhD student, you're going to be spending, a lot of time in the lab, you're going to be working with your PI. But kind of, can you talk a little bit like also about the collegiality overall that exists at Vanderbilt in terms of people? I mean, you mentioned, yes, people, working together, whether it be in engineering, from engineering to the medical center and all the cross collaboration that happens. But in terms of like, what are other types of outreach opportunities that graduate students have, whether it be, being able to attend conferences or perhaps, being part of student organizations or just having access to the career office or other resources in which can help with your own like personal and professional development?
I can say a couple of things on that. I definitely don't personally take advantage of as many things as there are, because there's like too many things to take advantage of and I only have so much time. But I recently, there's a women's center, and there's a career center. I recently attended a salary negotiation workshop specifically for women, on which I'm sure that there are gender neutral salary negotiation workshops, but I went to the women's one. And that things like that, that are accessible. I guess the way that you phrased the question in the beginning made me think of how much collaboration there is, and not even just collaboration, but just like camaraderie. There's a lot of value in sort of being friends with people in other disciplines, and through Vanderbilt, and through like the various sort of organizations, I've become friends with people in other disciplines. And then when you complain, there's a certain amount of like cross-pollination of knowledge through, really informal talks, like just getting lunch and saying, oh, have you talked to the IT department about that install problem you're having? And I'm like, oh, wow, that's a good idea. I didn't even think to do that. I'm so used to just like putting my head down and dealing with my problems on my own. That's a real thing that like, over lunch, people have ideas. I'm sure that, I don't know if you guys have other ideas of things.
Yeah, I mean, there's I got so much I can say. At least at the Biophotonics Center, our labs, our group of labs is kind of removed from the BME department a little bit. We kind of have our own little building tucked back away in campus. But as far as like we give each other, we're constantly talking with each other, giving each other feedback, presenting our work, and trying to get help on certain things. There's different people in our lab that are that are experts in certain subject matters over others, and that when those kinds of things pop up, it makes it very easy to collaborate. That's just within our lab, but as far as outside the lab, crap, we've got more projects than we know what to do with all the time. Like kind of going back to when we were hyping up Vice a little bit, we Anita literally has, or Dr. MJ literally has surgeons coming into her office multiple times a month, just like with ideas that they want to try and like fix a problem that they have in the surgical suite. And you know, if it's something that we can't help them with, most of the time she ends up sending them to Dr. Miga in Winona's lab. So it ends up working out really well. But that kind of, that was actually something I sought out when looking at schools. Is not a thing that was, or not an environment that was super cutthroat, something that was more collegial, and you know, everybody kind of gets along and works together and wants each other to succeed, because in reality, this stuff's not really a zero-sum game. That was a really big part of me choosing Vanderbilt, at least.
Yeah, and I guess outside of the science side, I feel like we just have a really good community of grad students here as well. So things have been different with COVID and everything, but especially before then, we have the BME Graduate Student Association, which puts on a few events most semesters. So we'll do things like tailgate before Vanderbilt football games, or just get together for like a pickup like kickball game or something. Those are things that I've been to before. And then the BME department as a whole always has like a holiday party before the holiday break. So that's always a great time to get to like see, you know, grad students that don't work in your building, or see just your professors outside of like work, I guess, which can be really cool. And then we can't talk about the vibe at Vanderbilt without talking about our BME band, which is a group of our professors headed by our department chair, Dr. Mike King, who pretty much play every event we have. They play our recruitment, and they usually play the Christmas party as well. It's just a bunch of them just having fun, and students are more than welcome to join as well if you're musically inclined. I have a couple of friends in my lab who have been part of the BME band as well. So those are just a couple examples of sort of the away from the bench community that we have. Things that make it fun to work here.
All right, nice, good examples. Next question. So Vanderbilt is located in the city of Nashville in the state of Tennessee. So tell me a little bit about what is your opinion about the city, and kind of what have been what do you enjoy doing, you know, when you're out and about in Nashville?
I can go first on this one. I love living in Nashville. So I mentioned that I'm originally from Northeast Ohio, and that's where I did my undergrad. So a huge thing I love about living here is the weather. It can get pretty hot in the summer, but the winters are so mild, and the fall and spring is extremely pleasant and temperate and just lovely. And then I guess from personal experience, I am a pretty avid runner. So one of my favorite things to do around the city is just run through the city and the different neighborhoods and see all of town that way, as well as going to some of the parks that are outside of the city to explore as well.
Yeah, I'm probably set up to live in Nashville for about a decade at this point. My wife and I absolutely love Nashville. It's taken us a couple of years to really get the hang of it, but we really do like living here. We live in a place where we can pretty much walk to wherever we want to go. I ride my bike a lot, and my apartment is right on one of the main Greenway bike paths in Nashville. I could probably ride about 40 or 50 miles on the Greenway without having to worry about without having to be on the actual like main road too much, which is pretty cool. So that's really nice. And also the weather, it gets a little muggy for me. I'm from the Northeast. I'm from Rhode Island and did my undergrad in Maine, so it's a little hot. But that said, as I had mentioned earlier, as Carly had mentioned, with the mild winters, it means I can ride my bike in the winter, which I'm happy about. It makes for really good hiking too. We're not too far from East Tennessee, where the Smoky Mountains are, and I guess the Appalachian Mountains as well. They're not too far away, probably about a 3 or 4 hour drive. We're pretty close to Chattanooga as well. My wife and I love going vacationing there. It's a cute little town with lots of hiking, and there's an endless amount of things to do around here. The restaurants are all really good. It's really great. I don't really have any bad things to say about the life here.
Contrasting what you said, so moving up here from New Orleans, where I lived with my bike before Nashville, I felt it was a little bit cold in the winter to ride my bike. There's like, if it gets below like 25, the wind chill is just too much for me and I don't ride my bike. But that's only like 1 or 2 weeks a year. And so I almost entirely agree with Wilson about you can ride your bike year round. And I did. My first year that I was here, I only had a bike and I biked everywhere. You can bike. I live like a mile from campus and I can bike to campus. I can bike to all sorts of clusters of little neighborhoods. I could bike downtown. I could bike, like Wilson said, there's tons of Greenway paths, and they've only gotten better since, that was like 4 years ago now. And they just keep putting in more protected bike lanes. So the bikeability it's hillier than New Orleans, but almost everywhere is. And the other thing I wanted to say that the bikeability and walkability, and then the other thing is the live music. Obviously with COVID, it's a little bit different. But I do think that there's always something going on. And Vanderbilt, at least pre-pandemic, they signed up all of the grad students for a work-life balance email that came out every week. And it would be a rundown of all of the events that were happening in Nashville. So it was everything that was happening, like, today, tomorrow, and then for the next 6 months, basically. It was like, more dense for the like next 2 weeks. But then if there were like big shows that you'd have to buy tickets for in advance. So what you could do is, if someone was coming to visit, you could look and you could say, oh, there's going to be a blah, blah, blah concert the weekend that you're in town. Like, do you want me to get tickets? And that was really convenient. Also, it would be like, oh, it's Thursday. What should I do this weekend? And you could look and then choose some of the fun things that were going on around the city. And then there's live music that is always fun. There's one of my favorite things is the station over in the Gulch. Every Sunday they have a jam session, a bluegrass jam session, if you're into such things. And it's just a bunch of, like, they have a bunch of regulars that come, but also anyone can go and play, and they just jam. They just have a bluegrass jam, and you can buy some beer, have some pizza, and listen to live music, and it's free. Anyway, it's fun. It's really fun. That's just one example. There's obviously a ton of other things going on all the time.
Yeah, so it's a very exciting place to be. Nashville is among the top 10 fastest growing economies right now in the US. But then it's also a really neat place, similar to what our panelists were talking about. You have access to a lot of these green spaces. You're in an area where you're in a city, medium-sized city, but with a lot of those big city type resources. So if you want to live in a city, you get that feel of being in a city, but at the same time, you're surrounded by mountains on all sides. So you're only about a 20, maybe 30-minute drive in any direction from the countryside. So you really get the best of both worlds of being in a city and then having the outdoors right there. So yeah, no, very good points that you made. So we have 10 minutes left, and Emily, I just wanted to just check in and see if in the feed, if in the social media feeds that you're seeing, do we have any questions that have appeared so far from any of the listeners?
No questions right now, but there have been a lot of people coming in and out. So I guess I will ask a question. If you could, for just a real quick 30-second, what is one thing you wish you knew before going to grad school?
I wish I knew when COVID was going to be happening while I was writing my dissertation. That would have been nice. It worked out though. We had my wife and I had a baby girl in June, so I got to like pretty much be at home for most of her, first year of life. It's been pretty awesome.
Yeah, I guess I wish I knew when I was looking for labs to pay to emphasize the culture of the lab more than the research. That sounds bad for me saying it, but I actually lucked out because I love my lab like so much. But when I was interviewing, I was so like laser focused on like the projects I was gonna work on and like, oh, like what like papers am I gonna try to get or whatever. But what really gets you through graduate school is all the friends that you make and actually wanting to go to work with these people every day. So if you're thinking about that, I think on your visits and stuff, trying to get a feel for like the culture of the lab should be more important than trying to pick like a specific project or specific like, I guess, research focus.
I guess I'll say something in a similar vein of like, I'm lucky that it worked out, but in hindsight, I probably should have been more aware. And I'll say, I wish that I had known to sort of ask graduate students the mentoring style of the PI. And I think I maybe did that. People people say vague things. But to sort of really get a handle on what it will be like I said, I really lucked out that my advisor and I meshed really well in terms of like how much oversight I want and how much oversight he provides. But I think it's good to have a really clear handle on what that will be like, because I think that's one of the biggest things that leads to a mismatch of advisor and student is just not being on the same page with. I mean, one of the things is like, oh, I don't like this research as much as this other research. But I think the other main thing is not being on the same page of how much involvement you want. So that's just something to ask people about.
It's actually something I tell pretty much everybody that comes through here in interviews. All these fresh out of undergrad students are like, I want to do this project. I want to do this project. And I always tell them, pick the lab that you're going to hate your project at the end of 5 years. Surprise. Or maybe even 6 years if you're lucky. The only thing that's going to get you through that, like Carly said, is having a PI that you like, or a professor that you like, and having a lab that's super supportive. So without those things, you're on your own. And I definitely could not have done this on my own.
All right. Yeah, that was a good question. And I kind of wanted, we have 6 minutes left. So in the 6 minutes, if you could all share with us, what are your plans for after graduation? I know, Wilson, you just graduated, so you're already probably much more apt to give your answer just because you're already there. But I guess, for Carly and Winona also, like what are your plans for after you graduate? So what do you see yourself doing with after graduate school?
I can elaborate on what mine are since it's already happening. So I'm doing a postdoc right now in Cody Siciliano's lab, who's in pharmacology at Vanderbilt School of Medicine. And his lab does a whole bunch of research on mouse models of alcohol and substance abuse. And what I ultimately want to do is be able to build a lab that develops optical imaging approaches to better understand how the brain works from a multicellular perspective. So not just neurons, but all the other non-neuronal cells in the brain, how they all kind of interact, building microscopes that let us be able to look at those things in live and behaving animals so we can treat diseases and disorders better.
I can go, I guess. I don't know is my short answer. The long answer is I definitely like a lot of different things about my different options. There are really big draws sort of on both sides. And by both sides, I mean in academia, sort of doing a postdoc, following, becoming a professor. There's basically pros and cons to both thing, and I need to like make a big list and decide. There's industry over here where there's more structure and things get done faster, and there's academia where there's like more freedom and teaching, which I like. I don't know. We'll see. I have no idea. The short answer.
Yeah, so I'm about 2 years away, I guess, from whatever my next step would be. So right now I'm still definitely on sort of the professor track. So the next step for me would be an academic postdoc. And so I guess quickly I can maybe talk about what's exciting about doing a postdoc if you are interested in becoming a professor, because basically the idea is that you sort of you get all this expertise in your PhD in like a very specific area and you write this whole dissertation on it and whatever. And then your postdoc is your opportunity to kind of branch out. So you have all this experience and you should be considered probably a pretty smart person by then, theoretically. And so your postdoc is an opportunity to go to a new lab, a new place, see what kind of skills you can still add to your tool set, and also try to think about, as you're thinking about a professor in a lab you might want to start, kind of like how Wilson was talking about, how you can marry all these areas of expertise into a goal of like a lab that you might want to build and bring your own like twist to your field. So as I'm sort of on the second half of my PhD and like starting to think about postdoc opportunities, it's an opportunity to start to think about where I see myself like contributing to my field, which is really just exciting at like an intellectual level, I guess. But there's a lot of work between here and there.
But the time will fly, so enjoy the moment. So I see we have 2 minutes left in today's event. Emily, just wanted to check back in. Do we have any questions in the feed?
No questions.
Okay, all right. I'm assuming that's because we pretty much probably answered all the questions already. So, I mean, if not, we'll have students reach out to us after the session and that'll be good. We have 2 minutes left. So I just kind of wanted to close out and just to say, for our panelists, is there anything else that you want to just say before we sign off in terms of just advice or just anything, any last thoughts?
Yeah, I guess I would say like, don't take life too seriously. Don't be too hard on yourself. We've given you a lot of recommendations and things to think about and how to try to make yourself a better applicant, for example, but it's all going to work out and you're going to end up where you should be. I think none of us, when we started our application process, decided or like knew that we would end up at Vanderbilt, but we're all quite happy here. So yeah, don't put too much pressure on yourself, and your path doesn't have to be linear. It doesn't have to be exactly what ours was. I have plenty of friends who worked for a few years before grad school or decided that grad school wasn't for them and things like that. So don't worry too much, and it's gonna work out, I guess.
I know that it's 8 o'clock, but I actually wanted to say one thing, and that's just that in relation to everything that I totally agree with everything that Carly just said. But that Vanderbilt, there's no rotations in the beginning of grad school. You do your interviews, and those interviews are basically your rotations. And so you know what, like, you're not joining Vanderbilt and then choosing a PI. You get accepted or you get invited by Vanderbilt, and then if you get accepted to somebody's lab. And I think that for me, that's been really, really valuable, to basically to know what I'm signing up for. And so just to keep a mental note of, like, at the time when I was applying to things, I thought that would be bad because I was like, I don't know what I want to do. But then after all of the interviews, it became clear that it was advantageous to sign up for a known versus a maybe at another school. So we hadn't touched on that process at all, but I just wanted to say that one thing.
I think that is true for the BME program, but I think it is different for other engineering programs, just when we're talking about the whole VUSC as a whole.
That is true, but this is for BME only. That's true. Yes.
I don't think I have too much to add to that. If anyone has any questions, my Twitter DMs are open, so you know where to find me.
Yeah, you can email me. Or I guess if you DM me on Twitter, I probably won't see it for several weeks, but you can still do it.
All right. No, I mean, oh, sorry. Go ahead, Carly.
I was saying my DMs are also open.
All right. And what we can do is after today's event, if there are any students that are, that are writing out feedback, on our social media platforms, Emily will be able to see that, and then she can just forward, our contact information to those students about, if they want to follow up. So yeah, either way, we definitely have ways to stay in contact, as a follow-up after today's event. Want to thank all three of you for coming out today. I mean, this has been really exciting. Just to have you here and to really hear, from your perspectives, what your experience has been like. And I know this has been extremely valuable for the students, the prospective students that were listening in tonight. So this has been, just a really fun night to have everybody here. Hopefully we'll be able to start doing this more in person, once things subside with the pandemic. Also, thank you, Emily, as always, for putting this together and for organizing this. This was definitely, this has been a lot of fun. So yes, have a great evening, everyone. Thank you so much for doing such a great job in representing your department to the world on social media. So you did a great job tonight. And we will all be in contact, and stay safe. All right.